Welcome back, reference getters. Today, we get to talk about Pokemon Yellow. This is a very odd game looking back at it, because unlike the other third improved versions that would follow, this game actively found a few ways to make the game's experience worse than what the original provided. Yeah, while that may come as a shocker to some, that's why I'm here, to explain how this is the case. And as you may see from the timestamps on screen, this critique is structured a bit differently, sorted by the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's begin. So let's start on a good note and talk positives. And I suppose not finding ways to make the games worse is a good thing, yeah? I.e. the story and the game's progression. And with that said, I suppose we can talk about two of the positive trainer changes first. And starting that off is the rival. So while his story bits are, mostly unchanged, same going for his battle locations as well, however, his teams did not get the same treatment and were changed just a wee bit. While I want to go further in depth with that later, the important thing is his starter Eevee, as unlike Let's Go Pikachu would later do, in this game, your rival starter is not scripted to evolve into one specific Pokemon, but instead, the Eevee would evolve based on your performance within the first two rival battles, which of course is good for replayability, and sadly the only positive in that vein. As with you, you'll always have the one starter Pikachu. There's no choice for you at all, but they actually found a way to not make the rival have the same issue, which is nice. Now, on the other hand, Jesse and James from the anime were added in as boss fights, which essentially just replaced a few rocket grunts within the game. Overall, their presence in the game is a net positive, as gameplay-wise, two of the battles they end up replacing are generally better, with the Lavender Tower battle being an arguable improvement over the replaced battles. But speaking of battles, one of the biggest gripes I had with Red and Blue has been addressed. This being the lack of custom movesets on trainer Pokemon. And by that, technically in Red and Blue, they were in the game, but only on one Pokemon for each boss trainer's team, with a single move in their moveset being adjusted. AKA, they technically did not have a full-blown level up moveset. Now, significantly more Pokemon on said boss trainer teams have more personalized movesets. So, actual diversity instead of a copy and paste, which is of course great, and the precedent it set for future games is as well. But on the topic of Pokemon, the sprites of the Pokemon themselves have been standardized to be less interesting. Overall, a very good success, as it allows the game to only look awful half of the time, which is obviously a hardware issue and no fault of the game. But with that said, these are the positives that the game provides. Okay, now look at how far we are in the video. Yep, sadly it only goes downhill from here. But hey, on the bright side, gambling is still in the game. Alright, to begin with the bad, where else to start but the starter itself? As this game took inspiration from the anime, they decided the best decision for the player is to make your starter be a Pikachu. Always. Which of course is going from a choice between three starters to always forcing one on you, which would and did hurt the game's replayability. Compound that with the rant in the next section, makes the game miserable to play more than once. And it doesn't help that the Pikachu is unable to evolve, because of course, it's an anime reference. Speaking of anime references, just like in the anime, your starter Pikachu will also follow you in the overworld if it's in your party. The best feature in the entire series. Overall, it doesn't add anything to the game other than increasing the amount of time you spend at a Pokemon Center when healing, which in an already slow game is just a further waste of time. But you know what I find hilarious? How I can actually complain about color being added to a game, because unlike the Pokemon sprites, the overworld with colors just looks horrific. Maybe it's just the PC saturation, but it makes looking at the game pretty unenjoyable for no reason, especially when transitioning between locations, as it's just rough on the eyes. Even if the color choices make sense, as each color scheme is based on a location, which, surprise, are named after colors, or are color-coded for routes in caves respectively. Regardless, this section was supposed to be longer, but the game just lacks actual content adjustments to even speak about. And with that said, let's just shuffle on to the actual gameplay pain. because when you dig a bit deeper, the game's level curve and some of the boss Pokemon themselves are the absolute biggest issues in the game, and it kills any hope of replay value that the game was supposed to have. So let's see why that is. But first, let's talk about the level curve. Now, in Red and Blue, the level curve was already bad, and to fix this, it's almost like they asked how they could fix the issue, and then did a complete 180 and made it worse instead. So where else to start but the gyms? While the levels for the first gym improve as it's lower, but you'll have the issue of your starter being completely unusable for the gym, as you're immediately stuck wasting time to grind up levels on a Pokemon that you're going to replace anyways, as you will not be able to progress otherwise. Regardless, Gym 2 is fine. Gym 3 is questionable, as the leader only has a single Pokemon, so of course they had to inflate its level as well, despite being easy to cheese. But speaking on inflated levels, every single gym past this point has this problem. See, Gym 4 had the issue of being stuck between progressing the story as soon as reaching Celadon City, via the Rocket Hideout, or finishing the Pokemon Tower story piece. Now it's suggested that you delay it for the latter just from level alone, which honestly, this one isn't an insult, and the level increase seemed justified. However, Gym 5 is the absolute worst in this vein. So here is Koga's team in Red and Blue. See, semi-reasonable in the level department. However, in Yellow, here is his team. And you see this absolute sin that is the 5th gym. There is an entire level 50 in here. Why? And might I remind you that Erica just had a level 32. This completely unreasonable jump is a genuine disgrace, and it makes the release date of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl look okay. But guess what? It somehow gets even worse, as the 6th gym has no level increase in comparison to the 5th one, which is a bad sign, as all 3 of the gym leaders' Pokemon are all level 50, which, like the last gym, is a 7-level jump. Meanwhile, Gym 7 goes up to 54 from 47, so another 7 levels that nobody asked for that are just getting presented to us. Now you pack that with Gym 8's 5-level increase, rounding out the gym challenge at 55. Thankfully though, the levels of the Elite Four were not compromised, meaning it's only the bulk of the game that was turned into more of a grind fest. Now, I know I always sound paranoid when I talk about these long rants and numbers attached to a PNG, in which, to an extent, you are right. But remember, the level curve is extremely important for pacing, as it took a game with already rough pacing and cranked it up even more since most normal trainers went completely unadjusted, and so the level curve as a direct result fell flat. To round this part out, I just want to talk about some questionable decisions to the gym leader and champion teams, as in some areas the changes were odd. For example, the champion battle has a Sand Slash, when keeping the Rhydon would have worked perfectly fine because of the larger spread of more personalized movesets. Remember, the one in Red and Blue had 3 moves that just had no synergy, especially when 2 of those were the exact same move with a reskin. Now, this doesn't just apply to the Sand Slash, but the champion's Fire, Water, Core will fall into this trap as well. But if you look at the gym leaders, Gym 3 is just a Raichu. Now I know, anime reference, but come on man. What kind of joke is this for gameplay purposes? Gym 4 has 2 of its Pokemon devolved, and for what? Now Gym 5 is just disgusting. Why does Koga have 3 of the same Pokemon? In fact, none of these Pokemon were even on his original team, which is just an added insult. And then finally, there's Gym 6. Honestly, the only issue here is the Abra's moveset. Otherwise, I can forgive having the strongest unevolved evolution line as this team. Now, I could speak on the 8th gym leader breaking away from the all-ground type team, but the Persian's a reference, so it gets a pass. It didn't help that Sabrina had the same issue in the Red and Blue. But with that, we're done talking about the game's worst aspect, that actually allows the game to have an identity of its own. Ahem. So with that said, I have a few final notes to speak on. So here's the thing, like in the Black 2 and White 2 video, I easily could have a short section dedicated to what I didn't speak on in the Red and Blue video. However, in defense of Gold and Silver, I think it'd be best to save those specific changes for that video so there's actual good to say about those games. So what mechanics am I even talking about there? Trapping moves that hit multiple times, which were completely unbalanced, and the status conditions that are freeze and sleep, for being pleasantly broken and needing massive rework. So so they make out with honorable mentions. But something that was a grave sin that somehow wasn't spoken about in the Red and Blue video, my apologies, is the two versions and the exclusives between it. However, mentioning it here also works because this is a third improved version. The thing is that most Pokemon games were sold as pairs, each of which had small differences to justify actually selling the same game twice. But within the context of Red and Blue, the only things different between the versions is a few Pokemon found in the grass patches, which mainly existed to encourage communicating with other players to complete the Pokédex, or to scam you into buying the same game twice. Now Pokemon Yellow comes in here because, as a third improved version, you take an assumption they may ditch this philosophy. And if you thought that, you would be absolutely foolish. Instead, Pokemon Yellow would set a pretty bad precedent. To only encourage this behavior, it has its own list of Pokemon that cannot be obtained within the game. Hell, you can't even get another Pikachu to evolve into a Raichu. Ultimately, this would lead to the third improved versions to follow to never actually have all of the Pokemon in one game. So whenever I talk about, let's say, Pokemon Platinum or Pokemon Emerald for instance, and say that either have X amount of Pokemon in its Pokédex for use, however, in multiple examples, the game cannot be obtained. Which, surprise, leads us back to Yellow, which just enabled the trend by having an odd selection of unobtainable Pokemon. Yes, I know it's an anime reference, but again, a bad precedent for the future. Regardless, that is all for Pokemon Yellow, so let's just prep the game and bury it. In the end, I wish I could have lied to myself when making this video, that the game was fine, and actually better than Red and Blue. But going back and playing the game for this video, it was a complete and utter chore, and I just didn't want to play the game nor write this video. But here we are, I suppose. Ultimately, Pokemon Yellow just isn't very good, as again, the changes actively hurt the game's replayability beyond repair, as mainly seen with the boss battle reworks. And for what? So you can use Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle on the same team despite them being relatively replaceable? Regardless, it's an experience that I just would not recommend ever, especially for revisits. Just go play Red and Blue, Fire Red or Leaf Green, or the Let's Go games, which of course were spiritual remakes of Yellow. But enough with the rambling. While I don't think the game is, quote, bad, it's surely not good. So with that said, I give Pokemon Yellow a very shaky score of 2.4 out of 10. Again, for all the reasoning I said in this video, it's just a struggle to play, despite some slack needing to be given for age alone. But on the bright side, it only gets better from here. Thank you for watching.